Now, coming up very, very shortly, your chance to put questions about education to the man in charge of Ofsted in our region. Matthew Purves is waiting in the wings. He's the South East Regional Director of Ofsted. They are basically the schools inspector that rule what schools are, whether they're outstanding, whether they're good, whether they require improvement, whether they're inadequate. There's been lots in the news recently. If you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, if you're a teacher, if you're a student and you're listening to this and you would like to put your question to Matthew, or indeed just your comments, let us know and we can do that either on your behalf or you're more than welcome to speak to him directly. Our number to get through to us here in the studio is 0808 100 3800. We've got posts on Facebook as well. If you want to comment on there, feel free. Search for us, BBC Radio Solent. You can WhatsApp 08000 321 333. Start your message with the word Solent, or indeed you can email me direct to the studio. The address louisa@bbc.co.uk. So what do you think about Ofsted? Do you like the one-word judgments? Are they making life more challenging for teachers, for heads? What is your point? We can make it to the man at the top, so get in touch. 0808 100 3800 or WhatsApp 08000 321 333. Start your message with the word Solent. We'll be chatting to Matthew live after this. Ofsted, or the Office for Standards in Education, Children's Services and Skills, the body that inspects education services right around the country, is carrying out something called a Big Listen. It's going on until the end of this month, essentially asking for feedback from parents, from teachers and children about their work. They're looking to take any questions that you might have about Ofsted. We're doing that today. We're doing it now, and you can call us 0808 100 3800. That is a free to call number, 0808 100 3800. If it's easier to WhatsApp, the number is 08000 321 333. And make sure Solent is the first word of your message. Now, in a moment, we're going to be talking to Matthew Purves. He is the South East Regional Director of Ofsted. But before we do that and take some of your questions, here's a little bit of background from our political reporter, Emily Hudson.
Thanks, Louisa. Yeah, one of the things which will come up today, and I know it has because we've already had emails about it, is the one-word judgment, which can be outstanding, good, requires improvement or inadequate. There are 4 options. Now, in January, a report from the Cross-Party Education Select Committee called for an end to these judgments, which are either 1 or 2 words. Heads have been unhappy for many years about it, but it came to prominence after the head teacher of Caversham Primary in Reading, Ruth Perry, took her own life after her school was downgraded. Her school had always been outstanding, but she knew it had been given an inadequate grading. And practice letters found after she died included her writing to parents saying, "I'm utterly broken, I'm devastated by the impact, I've done a disservice to the community, I'm sorry I've let you down." Her family have campaigned for these 1 or 2 word judgments to go, but in April the government said they would remain, saying they gave parents an important summary of local schools. They say, in our view, the priority is to look for ways to improve the current system rather than developing an alternative to it. Now, after Ruth Perry's inquest, Ofsted apologised the following month for the role it played in her suicide, promised a review of lessons to be learned. We can assume this big lesson is part of that. Like I say, the one-word judgment will definitely be on there. Tony and Marchwood, do Ofsted support this one-word classification of schools? Would they be happy with that when it comes to their own annual review? And John, a head teacher who preferred to remain anonymous, I am very concerned why they are so set on retaining these one-word judgments. It's more about making it easy to run things by spreadsheets than helping schools to improve.
Well, we will get to lots more of those questions and comments through the course of this hour. Let's bring in Matthew Purves now, South East Regional Director of Ofsted. Good morning to you, Matthew.
Morning, Lou. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us. We've got questions that are coming through to you, which we will get to in just a moment. But I think it's fair to say this has been a pretty controversial time for Ofsted, especially now with those one-word judgments under the spotlight. Is this Big Listen in response to the criticisms that you've had?
So, Lou, the Big Listen really comes from 2 things. First of all, yes, absolutely. Emily mentioned there, in response to the inquest, Ofsted, we immediately came out apologise, said we'd learn lessons and change what we do. And I can talk a bit about that as we go this morning. But also we have a new chief inspector who's joined us, Sir Martin Oliver. He's just come from leading a set of schools in some of the most deprived and disadvantaged part of the country. And he wants to throw the doors open and listen to parents, to children, to school leaders, to really everyone who wants to say something about how we go about what we do. So yes, so the big listen's about getting that feedback, listening to it, and then reflecting it back to ourselves, to government and to others, and thinking how Ofsted can change going into the future.
It would be interesting to find out and learn a little bit about the big listen and how that's actually working in practice. This morning, for example, on our breakfast show, we were hearing from Sarah Hussey. She's a former head teacher from the Isle of Wight, and she had this criticism.
It's not an open forum for listening. They've asked very specific questions and you have to answer those questions. So they're listening to the questions that they are asking you. So, for example, there are questions like, should Ofsted be reporting on the quality of safeguarding? Now, you wouldn't put disagree in that, would you? Nobody would. Of course you would want them to report on the quality of safeguarding. It isn't that we disagree with what's happening, we disagree with how it's done. They've already had the cross-parliamentary report to say that single word judgments should be the main thing that goes, and they've already said that that's not going to happen. So, I mean, who are they listening to? Because it's not the profession.
And Emily Hudson, our political reporter, is still with me. This is also a theme that came up when you were asking the question.
Yes, and there was a lot of people who commented on our Facebook post last night when we asked what people felt about the one-word judgments, sort of saying how would Ofsted feel about a one-word judgment of them, and lots of people using the word failing, inadequate, not useful, those kind of comments. So that has been the overriding thing that's come, one-word judgments.
So Matthew, just back to you. We'll get to the one-word judgment in just a moment. First of all, though, the big listen, criticism there that the questions you're asking are slightly sort of loaded. They're not getting a true response from people in education and what they actually think.
Well, look, in any survey, any way of asking questions, you do two things. You ask some specific questions, yes, no, agree, disagree, but you also ask some open questions and invite people to give their full feedback. And the big listen is just like that. Yes, as Sarah said in your recording, there are some agree, disagree questions in there, but there is also plenty of space in there to give full feedback, free text feedback. The other thing I'd say is I've spent the past couple of months going around the region with His Majesty's inspectors, holding roadshows for school leaders in different schools, them having other head teachers in, just telling us straight what their opinion is. So we're gathering feedback in lots of different ways. And that question that somebody asked in that recording there, who are Ofsted listening to? Well, we're listening to leaders, but we're also listening to parents and to children. And as part of the big listen, there's a specific part of that, which is getting children's feedback. And I think 15 or 16,000 people have responded to the big listen so far. We want it to be many more than that, but I know that more than 3,500 of those are children. So it's really important that we hear the views of school leaders, absolutely, others that we inspect, but also we want parents and children to feed into that big listen. And I really encourage your listeners to Google Ofsted Big Listen and give us your views.
And it's your chance to do that this morning. Matthew Purves is with me, South East Regional Director of Ofsted. Any questions, any comments, 0808 100 3800. He's with us for the rest of this hour here on BBC Radio Solent. We're going to be hearing from a head teacher in Dorchester in just a moment, but I think it is high time we actually addressed this conversation about one-word judgments. So much criticism, so many comments, as we were saying on our Facebook page, some quite scathing comments as well. What is it you wanted to say about the one-word judgments, Matthew?
Well, one-word judgments is something that we're asking about in the big listen, and we want full and frank views in that, and we know that people are not slow in giving those. The thing I'd say about one-word judgments is they've got strengths and weaknesses, and actually the strength and the weakness are the same thing. The strength is they're really clear and simple for parents. As well as working in education for 20 years or more, I'm a parent, and when I sit round with other parents of primary school age children and they think about school, they start with that one-word judgment. It helps them understand. That's the strength. But the weakness is it's simple. And so you shouldn't stop the conversation there. And so when I'm having that conversation with other parents, I say, yes, but have you read the really rich inspection report that goes along with that, that's written from the point of view of what is it like to be a child at this school? And have you gone and seen the school? Have you gone and visited it as well and engaged with it? So one-word judgments are simple, and that is both helpful and difficult. And that's why we've got the big listen going, among other reasons. We want to hear people's views and feedback on that.
So do you think they're working?
Well, I think that they're part of a system of accountability within education, and lots of things happen as a result of judgments. And so within that context, they are working in that way. But I go back to what I just said, that they have strengths and weaknesses, and we need to go through a process of listening to find out what the right thing to do is going forward. But look, at the bottom of all of this, at the end of the day, our job is to make sure that all children are safe and they're getting the high standard of education they deserve, and inspectors coming into schools, spending time there, understanding the quality of what's going on, and then reporting to parents and to others is really, really important for that purpose.
Emily, with me in the studios, keeping our eye on questions coming through. You've got one that's just come in.
Yeah, head teacher from a primary school in Southampton. Does Ofsted consider sufficiently the context of the school's local area as part of their inspections and in the judgments they make? I suppose this means some schools are operating in tougher areas in terms of deprivation than others.
Yeah, it's such a great question, Emily, that the head teachers sent in. And yes, absolutely we do. And you think about any school, there's all sorts of, there's information that parents know about it, and we always survey parents, we always survey pupils and staff when we're inspecting, and we gather that. There's also all the published data about results and achievement and progress and so on. But all of that lives in a context. Every school is in a different context with different challenges and different opportunities for the children. And that's why inspectors go in and they have all that information and all that data, but it's only ever a starting point. They then go around that school, speak to parents at the gate, they speak to children, they speak to staff and leaders, and understand that context of the school, and then reflect that in that really rich inspection report that comes out at the end of it. So yes, it is taken into account, but I think that's something we need to keep thinking. How can we ever make context more clear in the way that we inspect and report?
I know it's sort of too early to look at all of the feedback that you are getting through the big listen, but if there is sort of an overarching theme that the one-word judgments are under question, I mean, they've been in the news so much in the last few months, is that something that you're going to prioritise looking at in the future?
So absolutely. So I started this conversation by saying we'll take whatever the big listen says to us. We'll be really honest and open about that. We'll be clear what's been said to us. We'll talk to government about it as well, and we'll be part of that conversation. So absolutely.
Matthew, we've got Gary Spracklin on the line. Gary is head teacher at the Prince of Wales School in Dorchester. Gary, morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. You are through then to Matthew Purves, who is South East Regional Director of Ofsted. What is the question you have for him?
Yeah, good morning, Matthew. Matthew, Ofsted stated to the Commons Educational Select Committee in March 24 that their funding is now 29% lower in real terms compared to 2009 and 2010. And my question is, how does Ofsted ensure that its inspections maintain the same level of rigour and quality despite what is obvious significant decreases in funding?
Gary, thanks very much for that question, and also for paying attention to that conversation. It's difficult. It's no more difficult for us than it is for schools, and you will know this much better than I right now, that some of the choices you're having to make in terms of budget and support for staff and pupils. We put as much of our resources we can into the frontline, into inspection, and we make sure that those 2-day inspections are sufficiently staff to carry out that level of assurance. But it is a struggle, and every year we cut some of the other things that we do around the rest of the organisation to put that money into making sure we have inspectors there getting that first-hand view, just as you have to do, I know, every day in school, thinking about that budget and balancing different challenges. But yes, it is a real struggle for us, but no more of a struggle than it is for many in the education sector right now.
Gary, anything else you'd like to ask?
No, thank you, and thank you for that response. And I really welcome the transparency that this process is providing, and it's great that we're able to have that say as part of the big listen. I think for me, it's important that we're clear about the limitations of an Ofsted inspection. They are a moment-in-time snapshot. When I first arrived at this school, it had been 10 and a half years since it had had an inspection because it was previously outstanding. And I then had my first inspection in June 2018, and have since recently had an inspection just before the Easter holidays. So it went five years again. And I think in both of those occasions, the children that were in the school at the time were not in the school at the previous inspection. And I think there's a role to play in how we communicate the limitations, both of a school in what we can do with the limited resources that we have available, and also what Ofsted can do with their limited resources as well.
Matthew, do you want to respond?
I think Gary's really right in what he says, and for a long time Ofsted was prevented by law from inspecting schools that had previously been judged outstanding. That was a policy decision taken 15 years ago or so. That's changed, and I'm really glad that that's changed, and because I think it's important Ofsted visits regularly, and as Gary says, we probably visit in schools that are good or better, which is 9 out of 10 schools, approximately every 5 years, and that means as pupils turn over and move through the year groups and move on, we come back and see what the experience is like for the fresh children. But yes, inspection is a point in time. And that's why I was saying what I was saying about make sure when you, as a parent, when you're thinking about the school, get that first-hand evidence as well. Use the inspection report, but also see with your own eyes what's going on.
Gary Spracklin, head teacher at Prince of Wales School in Dorchester. Thank you for your comment. Matthew, just on this subject actually of the snapshot in time, it would be interesting to just talk about how those inspections are conducted. We had an interesting email that came through very shortly, just a short while ago, and this is from a chap whose daughter works at a school, isn't it, Em?
Yes, Jeff Cheetah. My daughter works at a school in Bournemouth. They had Ofsted in recently. While she was delivering to the children, she was observed by 4 adults from Ofsted who never introduced themselves, never acknowledged her. My daughter's words were quite simply, they were very rude. Another element, and another sort of similar question actually from another head teacher who's come to me via Facebook, saying that actually for children who have extra needs, who may be the kind of children who often are placed in different areas because, education is difficult for them, having sort of this 4 new adults come in the room, he actually said 2, who are not introducing themselves and not explaining what they're doing, can actually be quite unnerving for some children and make them play up effectively.
So 2 really, really important things there. I mean, first of all, there are many more children with additional needs, with special educational needs in our schools now, and in the average primary secondary than there have been in the past. And it's really important that schools work really hard to support them, but also that Ofsted inspectors are really sensitive when we go into school. And so usually an inspector will ask school leaders, well, look, are there any particular classes or students that we need to be aware of and sensitive around? We don't always get that perfectly right, but usually we do. I was surprised to hear that 4 adults all walked into the same class. That's many more than we would send inspectors into a class. And I wonder if some of the senior leaders of the school wanted to come in as well, just to make sure they were seeing what we were seeing. But I'm really sorry that Jeff's daughter's experience was that the inspectors' experience was rude. That's not what we want at all. We want to inspect with professionalism, empathy, courtesy, and respect, because that's how everybody wants to be treated, and that's how we want to make sure we treat people. So I'm really sorry that was Jeff's daughter's experience, and I hope that's the exception, not the rule.
Matthew, we'll get back to you in just a moment. Matthew Purves is my guest here on BBC Radio Solent, South East Regional Director of Ofsted. Lines are open now. If you've got questions, get in touch. It's a free phone number, 0808 100 3800. 0808 100 3800. If it's easier to WhatsApp, it's 08000 321 333. Start your message with the word Solent, or you can email louisa@bbc.co.uk. We have got our guest Matthew Purves with us. He is the South East Regional Director of Ofsted. The reason we're speaking to him today, Ofsted are carrying out something called a Big Listen. It's going on until the end of May, essentially asking for feedback from you, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a child, about the work of Ofsted. We can put your questions directly to Matthew. You can do it yourself, in fact. 0808 100 3800. We've got him for about another 10 or 15 minutes, so get your call in nice and soon. WhatsApp number 08000 321 333. Start your message with the word Solent. Emily Hudson, our political reporter, also with me in the studio, who's been keeping our eye on questions coming in via Facebook and email. Em, you've got quite a few to get through, haven't you?
Yes, let's give you one, Matthew, from Peter Roberts. He doesn't say whether he's a teacher or a head teacher. He says, you probably know it's SATS week and an enormous stress for any school with a year 6 cohort. Would you be surprised that Ofsted still insist on visiting during this week, even if their demands mean that people with children they're relying on suddenly become unavailable? I think he means those who are meant to be sort of looking after the year 6 cohort or whatever, or teachers get swapped round in this week, and it's not a normal week. Why do you still go when there are year 6 SATs on?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Emily, and thanks to Peter for sending that question in. So Yes, it's absolutely true that we continue to inspect all the way through the year. The reason we do it is that we're there, as teachers and leaders are as well, for children. We want to make sure that children are safe, well looked after, and getting the best education they can. But what I'd say is that one of the things that we do when we call up to announce an inspection, so when the inspector calls the head teacher and their team, we have a conversation about what's going on in the school at that time. And sometimes SATs are going on, and actually that affects a small group of pupils, and we'll carefully stay away from that. Sometimes SATs are going on and they're disrupting the whole school. And so I can think of a couple of inspections this week where we've done what we call deferring the inspection. We've said, no, absolutely, we understand that these things are going on, and so we're not going to come in at this time because you've got to focus on this. So we have a really grown-up conversation with the leaders of the school to defer that inspection. So we absolutely do that, but it's really important that we're there in school as much as we can be, assuring that children are getting the best education they can.
There's a sort of subsid question to that, actually, about how long you give notice. Is that long enough? And how long you're in school, is that long enough?
Well, so we talked about the fact that we're in school usually for 2 days, and that with the teams of inspectors we have gives us a strong sense of assurance of what's going on. Notice is such a difficult one. If you ask any group of children, as I have over the years, how much notice Ofsted should give coming into school, they'll say none, just turn up. And if you ask any group of school leaders or people that I know in the professional world, they say give as much notice as possible. And parents have a mixture of views. It's really hard to find the right balance. Where we are at the moment is that the day before an inspection, you'll get a call from the lead inspector in the morning, checking that the inspection can go ahead. And that means that the school doesn't just have a set of inspectors who turn up on the door on the day, so they can do some preparation, but it also crucially means that there isn't multiple days of preparation, and schools aren't trying to prepare over a weekend and drawing staff in. It's just the day before. So that's the balance we've struck right now. But again, please, can everyone listening use that big listen, feed your views in, because we're open to listening and changing in that space too.
We're going to go to the lines in just a moment, speak to Mike and Romsey, get some more questions from Emily. If you'd like to speak to Matthew Purves, South East Regional Director of Ofsted, it's not too late. Get your call in now, 0808 100 3800. I just want to touch on something that we were talking about there, but also just before the travel, Matthew, about the training of your staff. There was some criticism from one teacher in Bournemouth about how inspectors conducted themselves during the inspection, also for children with extra needs that were, sometimes overwhelmed by the number of people coming in. After the death of Ruth Perry, I know the senior coroner highlighted the lack of training and guidance given to inspectors, the impact therefore on the staff at school, but not just that, obviously the children. So what have you done in terms of that training and guidance since then?
Well, look, we listened to what the coroner found. We apologised for our role in the tragic events there. And what we did before a single inspector set foot in a single school after that was we trained all of our inspectors. And in fact, we didn't do it. We drew in Mental Health First Aid England to train all of our inspectors. And if anyone's interested, you can find that training on YouTube, the whole section. You can watch it and watch what happened. And that's part of an ongoing process of training for inspectors. It doesn't mean that all inspectors are mental health first aid experts. Not all of us can be. But we're continually building that awareness. And something that we've done as well is we've introduced a way of pausing inspection, a policy for pausing inspection alongside that. So if a leader is concerned about what's going on, or an inspector is concerned about a leader's well-being, now we're really clear about how to push that button and pause that inspection and make sure that people who are responsible for caring that leader can be on site and looking after them. And that's all part of our learning. And we've also created a provider helpline, a hotline that will reach me and my team in the region. So if a leader is being inspected, a school's being inspected, and they've got a concern, but they don't feel they can raise that with the inspectors on site. And, we understand why, because inspection is a judgment process. So the power imbalance can be felt. So if they want to come around that and speak to me or my team to pause that inspection or raise a concern, that number's out there and we share that with leaders. And schools do use do use that within the southeast and across the country. So we've changed a lot. That mental health first aid training, the pausing, the helpline, and what we do now is very different and was very different before the first inspection that took place this year.
So I suppose the next question is, when you do get feedback, as we have this morning, about inspectors that haven't actually lived up to maybe the standards that you would hold, especially now, how do you hold them to account? How do you look into that?
Well, really rigorously is the answer, Lou, because I can see during an inspection and immediately after an inspection the evidence that inspectors are gathering. We have a process where we share the findings with the school, and they give us feedback both on the accuracy and the factual nature of that inspection, but also raising anything through complaints. We've now got the helpline, and providers very often, schools call us the day after an inspection and say, listen, I just wanted to reflect on this. And then, as we all do in our professional environments, we have that conversation through our line management with inspectors. And wherever there's an issue about conduct or something that hasn't gone quite right, we pick that up with the inspector and make sure it's addressed. So we're absolutely careful to make sure we pick up any issues like that.
Matthew Purves is my guest here on BBC Radio Solent, South East Regional Director of Ofsted. Let's go back to the lines. Mike is in Romsey. Hello, Mike. Good morning.
Good morning, Louisa. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to talk to you. So you've got Matthew listening across. What's your question?
Yeah, being fair to Matthew, I think he sort of answered it, because my question was around culturally within Ofsted. We had an example this morning where somebody advised that the inspectors didn't even acknowledge the teacher. And I just think, for me, it sets such a bad example to the pupils. And for me, it still feels that within Ofsted, there's a culture of fear and derision that they want to create. And I wonder how Matthew counters that.
Okay, well, Mike, thank you very much. And what's going on in the back of my mind is I'm thinking, right, how can I dig into that inspection when I come off the line and understand what happened there? Because it's not the standard that we want of our inspectors, and it's not the standard they'd want of themselves. Sometimes there's a tricky balance you have to strike when you're passing through a classroom. As a senior leader in a school, sometimes you have to strike that balance as well. But we should always be courteous, empathetic, respectful and professional in the way that we engage with any teacher in a school, because we know that might be the one interaction that leader has with Ofsted over the course of 5 years, and that's what sticks in their mind. So absolutely, we pick that up. We follow that up wherever we get a complaint raised or something specific. We then pick that up with the individual inspector to help them do differently next time. But I do want to say that the vast majority of our inspectors, the vast majority of the time, do that really, really well. And I get all sorts of lovely feedback from schools, even those who maybe had a difficult judgment, saying, I just want to thank you for the way the inspectors conducted themselves with us. That's not saying we get it right all the time, but we're always on it when we don't. And actually, it goes right more often than not. Mike, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I appreciate that Matthew's taken a bit of a pounding this morning. So, firstly, it's nice that he actually steps forward. I think for me, as a parent and also somebody that has teachers within the family, that's not the experience that's happening. So, whilst the change has clearly been put in place, and unfortunately, it took an absolute tragedy for Ofsted to actually acknowledge that there was an issue. The speed of change just seems too slow, because we still have so many news reports of people finding this, beyond what is going to be a tough process, to just being, mentally absolutely challenging to people. And I don't want the teachers of my daughter or anybody's daughter or son feeling that their teacher is under so much pressure. And so for me, I would just say, great that you've acknowledged it, but please crack on and speed up that culture, because you clearly have an issue. You've acknowledged it, but it's how quickly you change that culture then adds to the benefit for all.
Well, Mike, thank you for that. I take that point. I'm listening. And, our priority is to make inspection as good and positive as possible for your daughter and for everyone else like her in school, and also for the teachers and leaders who look after her, because they don't have an easy job. They've got a really tricky job right now, and we want to support them as well. So thank you for what you said.
Mike in Romsey, thanks for the call there. Emily Hudson, political reporter, still with me. Wanted to move to a situation on the Isle of Wight now.
Yes, this is from Simon Richards, who's a governor at Haylands Primary School on the Isle of Wight. He says, I'm a member of the silent minority of the education system who think that Ofsted do a difficult but really necessary job. Our children deserve to be educated in schools that are inspected rigorously and held to account for delivering high quality education. My question, in their inspections, do Ofsted inspectors see evidence of excessive surplus school places in local areas having a detrimental impact on standards of education in schools? I think for those who are listening who don't know, the Isle of Wight has effectively too many primary schools. It has excessive surplus school places, schools that can take 30 children that might only have 15 in a class, and actually they're looking to close some schools. So Simon is asking, does having smaller classes, smaller schools impact standards of education, Matthew?
Well, look, before I did this role in Ofsted, and in fact during the pandemic, I helped to run a group of schools, and I specifically oversaw a group of 27 primary schools, and we were grappling with then what's even harder now, which is people have been having fewer children overall for the past few years. And that means that primary schools have got fewer pupils and there are more empty places. And that is really hard. It's really hard to deal with. And so having falling rules, because also schools' funding depends on the number of children that they have, can be really tricky. And so in local areas, including on the Isle of Wight, I know there's a lot of work being done to think about how primaries in particular can share some of their resources, share some of their ideas. So for example, as a primary school, if you don't have very many teachers and you maybe even have to teach mixed age group classes, you might have a bit of year 1 and year 2 together, or a bit of year 5 and year 6. To cover all the subjects in the curriculum, you can't possibly do all that work there. You need to partner with some of the other primary schools locally and draw on other resources. So it's not easy at all. It's having an impact. And I see lots of primaries reaching out to each other and working in partnership to try and address that. But look, Simon's really right. It's really hard at the moment.
As schools have become more business-like, though, running their buildings even is a sort of drain, isn't it? I know, having spoken to heads on the Isle of Wight, that's what they're saying, that they can't afford their overheads if they don't have enough pupils.
This is the great challenge, because your overheads are, you might call them fixed costs, but they're not fixed costs. We know they're not. We know they grow. Energy costs have gone up. Everything else. It's really hard balancing all of that as a head teacher. And so, being in a trust with other schools, or being in a group, being in a federation, sharing some of those resources and some of those costs is one possible solution. But I think none of us should underestimate the challenges that head teachers face every day and rise to.
Possibly one more for you, Matthew. Fiona Cribb. I've been in education for 30 years. I have no problem with being accountable, but the current system I don't feel is fit for purpose. I hope this big listen means there are plans to change it. How about working in partnership for the sake of students and the professionals who are in teaching?
Well, Fiona, you're the perfect person to fill in the big listen, because that's exactly where we are. We're saying it's really important that we all hold schools and other providers to account so that children get the best possible experience and life chances, but that we can always be better, that Ofsted has to be transparent and held to account as well, and we can be better and change what we do. So I hope Fiona, and I hope everyone else listening, is encouraged to Google Ofsted Big Listen and give us your views, because that will then give us the platform to know what we do next and what we change, so that we can keep all contributing to children getting the best start in life.
And Matthew, to conclude then, and just following on from Mike in Romsey, who was on the line talking about the sort of the timeline of this, the Big Listen concludes at the end of May. How do you collate that feedback? What do you do with it? How are you measuring its success?
Well, we want as many people as possible to fill it in. And then I said at the start, some of the questions are yes, no, or to what extent do you agree? We'll quite quickly know what the answer to that is. But we also have a team of people who are reading every single response that comes in and making sure that we draw that together, because we don't want to lose anyone's comments. So we'll draw that together, and then we'll reflect back publicly what's been said to us and what we as Ofsted are going to do in response. And so Martin Oliver, our Chief Inspector, is really keen that we're really transparent and open in the way we show what we're doing in response to the Big Listen. So Matthew, can we invite you back onto the programme in a few months from now? Of course. It'd be fantastic. All right, we will look forward to it. Thank you so much for your time today. Really good to talk to you. Thanks, Luna. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Matthew Purves, South East Regional Director of Ofsted, who's been my guest here on BBC Radio Solent since 11. If you've just tuned in, if you missed some of that, have a listen back on BBC Sound. Busy old hour. Thank you very much indeed to everybody for sending in those questions, to Matthew Purves, South East Regional Director of Ofsted. If you want to have a listen back, feel free. All available for you on BBC Sounds between 11 and 12.
Schools Inspector Ofsted wants feedback on how it can improve schools across the south. Parents, teachers and children are being asked what issues their education communities are experiencing in a consultation Ofsted is calling The Big Listen. Education consultant Sarah Hussey is a former head teacher of Northwood Primary School on the Isle of Wight.
Really, the issue we should be talking about is the pressure and the stress that school leaders and school teachers are under because of Ofsted. And I'm not in any way, shape or form saying that Ofsted shouldn't exist. Of course, schools should be held accountable, but it is the way that it's done that needs to change.